Introduction. Going feral, ladies, lords and cluckers. It is a generally accepted fact of the universe that while humans build the roads, erect the malls, and painstakingly maintain the golf courses, they are merely the groundskeepers. The true sovereigns of the concrete and the kiawe brush are much smaller, significantly hairier, and demand their dinner precisely at sundown. This is a record of a nightly pilgrimage. It takes place not in a mythical realm, but on the very real, sun-baked, and sometimes scarred edges of Lahaina. To the tourists, it is a paradise of white sand and tropical sunsets. To a feral cat, it is a bustling, chaotic, and often treacherous kingdom, a place where a good patch of shade is currency. And avoiding the prehistoric menace of the local chickens is a daily test of survival. Within these pages lies the chronicle of a 13-stop diplomatic mission. It is undertaken 5 nights a week by a highly trained meat dispenser, a human armed with a headlamp, a profound respect for feline eccentricity, and an alarming quantity of poultry pâté. From the roaring shoulder of the Canopy Highway to the heavily guarded perimeter of the UFO King boat yard. From the solemn quiet of the cemetery to the bureaucratic gloom of the Federal Post Office, each chapter documents a different fiefdom. You will meet lords holding court on volcanic rocks, ladies with the intelligence of ancient philosophers, ghosts of the highway, and insomniac fowls that defy the natural order of daylight. It is a tale of survival, of grief and reconstruction, and of the fragile, ridiculous, and beautiful treaties forged between humans and the stray cats of Maui, ending, as all great journeys must, at the most chaotic stop of all, home. Chapter 1, The Sovereign of the 7-Stop Sprawl. A man has to do something to give back to the society, even the world that's born him. Although we are tasked with a 9-to-5 and possibly a mortgage, 2.5 kids and a Labrador, and perhaps are expecting to adorn our slippers and pipe at the end of our 70-year span to live in some form of retirement, what we do in between all of that is the point of living. Stray cats are the most curious of dilemmas. They are sovereign to their post. Their spot of upbringing to move them is to invent trauma to their fragile state of living. Such social and well-domesticated creatures are better suited to a warm hearth, and a good supply of delicious but regular nutrient. They are the most of what love has to give, if it could be condensed into a cute furry bundle. So to start my story by cataloguing my weekly route of 23 stops, in each there is a torrid tale of curious survival by cute whiskered pointy-eared felines, who'd rather you dropped the food politely and left as politely in most cases. In between these are the real social magic workers, whose names are about to unfold in this little whimsy of the Lahaina cats. The tree dweller and the professional. At the first bend of the dusty trail, where the shadows of the palm trees stretch out like long, lazy fingers, lives V. V is a creature of high expectations and even higher arboreal standards. Residing strictly under a tree, she is quite free in spirit, a sovereign of the soil, except for the matter of tea, which she requires with a certain British urgency every evening. She expects her dinner precisely at 3, regarding a late delivery as a personal affront to the natural order of the universe. Nearby, one might encounter Bob. Now, Bob is a cat with the distinct, weary air of a feline, who has seen the bottom of many a kibble bag, and found it wanting. Bob has a good job, mostly involving looking professional while staring at lizards. But he suffers from the eternal plight of the worker. His boss is an overbearing slob, the forest god and the aristocrat. Further into the green, where the Lahaina brush thickens into a miniature jungle, lives Morris. Morris sounds remarkably like a man named Boris, possessing a meow that rumbles with the gravity of a Victorian parliamentarian. He lives among the trees of the forest, eating his food with a quiet, dignified grace. He is, if nothing else, never rude. He is often accompanied by Sooty Pie, a chap who is always happy to say hi, provided hi is accompanied by a small portion of tuna. Then, there is the matter of Sir Bonbon Fort Esquire the First. Depending on which side of the bush he wakes up on, he might answer to James Bonbon, Monsieur Bonbon, Herr Bonbon, Seigneur Bonbon. Mr. Bonbon. He carries himself with the weight of a dozen titles, a teeny-tiny fuzzy furry soldier standing guard over the ancient ruins of a discarded watering can. The Cluckers and the piglets. In the world of the Lahaina cats, physics is often treated as a polite suggestion rather than a law. Take Roxykins, for instance, or the legendary Galaxy, whose name is usually followed by an echoing meow that suggests she is communicating with the stars. And then there is the rhythmic phenomenon known as the clop. There is a cat here who clops till she drops, and then, finding the floor agreeable, drops till she clops. She is a perpetual motion machine of feline eccentricity, a cycle of dropping and clopping that keeps the local lizard population in a state of permanent confusion. Finally, one must look out for Quiglet. He is like a piglet, but with more whiskers and a talent for the Mr. Quiggles maneuver, which involves a wiggle so profound it seems to defy the skeletal structure of a mammal. These are the sovereigns of the stops, the furry heart of the island, waiting for the man with the food and the polite departure. Chapter 2, The First Stop. The Kanapali Highway is not, strictly speaking, a highway in the sense of grand, roaring avenues of commerce, but to a stray cat, it is the thundering edge of the known universe. It is along this stretch that the first of the evening's visitations commence. I arrive armed with the tools of the trade, a veritable quartermaster to the furry and demanding, a bottle of water, a box of kibbles that rattles like the maracas of salvation, and cans of wet food. The wet food must be in pâté form, because offering a sovereign street cat chunks in gravy is a breach of etiquette that takes generations to forgive. And so, the ritual begins. There, vibrating with anticipation by the roadside, awaits Dapples. Dapples is a cat of singular and confusing tastes. She likes her apples, though the logistics of feline dental work make this a difficult passion to pursue. Currently, however, she grapples with the intense political maneuvering required to meet me first. This is primarily because Lexi, who is quite flexy in the way only a creature made entirely of liquid and opportunistic physics can be, has already materialized from the ether and is trotting smartly right next to my ankle. Not to be outdone by this display of acrobatics, Sooty and Splashes make their entrance. They rise from the dust and ashes of the brush like two small, furry, and mildly impatient phoenixes, fully expecting their portion to be dispensed with the appropriate reverence. The sun is just beginning its dramatic, fiery plummet into the Pacific, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds, while I am busy fretting. There is a precise science to getting the feeding well done before the dark truly settles, a delicate balance of distribution and diplomacy. The feeding itself is less a meal and more of a jostle, a synchronized ballet of feline gluttony. They eat their feed with aggressive enthusiasm, then immediately execute a tactical flanking maneuver, running round behind me to see if the next station offers a superior vintage of pâté. There are just 5 little cats at this first stop, a quintet of the highway, and mostly they are a quite friendly lot. But Dapples, having won the grapple, is by far the first to look up, her whiskers dusted with crumbs, to deliver the official ambassadorial greeting. "Hello, Holmes," her eyes seem to say, with a profound and ancient wisdom. "Food for my tum, and water for my thirst. You may proceed." You've brought. Chapter 3, The Missing and the Catalyst. Here I am brought to say that even the best laid plans go astray, particularly at stops 2 and 3. One might expect a polite queue of felines, but one would be disappointed. They have vanished, prompted by the sudden arrival of progress, which usually sounds like a very loud engine and smells of diesel. After the great fires that took Lahaina, a tragedy that reshaped the map and the memory of the place, the town required new rocks for foundational debris. Thus, the great yellow metal beasts were brought in to crush rocks to naught. Now, a cat can tolerate many things, but the relentless, earth-shuddering thump crunch of industrial construction work is not one of them. The resident cats, possessing a great deal of evolutionary common sense, sensibly fled the scene. And so, instead of feeding ghosts at empty stations, I must introduce the first of my own cats, a creature that nature produced with an extra sprinkle of magic. Her name was Butterball, as the ancient texts, or at least, the poems, state. She was a true marvel, Butterball, she so cool, cute, furry, very small, but beyond being cute, she possessed the intelligence of the wise. She looked at the world as if she understood the punchline to a cosmic joke the rest of us were still trying to figure out. and she gave us immense delight with her endless surprises. She stayed with us for just 2 short years. The Kanapali Highway is a busy, roaring beast of an asphalt ribbon, and one morning, it took her away. She was simply gone, as though she'd never been, leaving a butterball-shaped hole in the fabric of the universe. We wept, as humans must when they realize a furry bundle of love has been unceremoniously evicted from the mortal coil, and we buried her remains with heavy hearts. But in the loss of that one cat began the adventure of more. Here is the true story of why I endure. It was a vow made to the dirt, to make sure I fed every cat that I found. Because paradise, it turns out, is a treacherous illusion for a stray. It is a busy habitat, a meat-grinding machine of the worst kind. On the mainland, a cat might expect 7 years to mind its own business, perhaps even successfully nap in a sunbeam. But on the island of Maui, a cat is lucky to scrape together 3 short years of life against the grinding gears of the world. And so, armed with pâté and a promise, the route continues. Chapter 4, Tijuana's Crew. In any proper accounting of a journey, the third stop is usually where the narrative finds its footing. We, however, shall proceed directly to the fourth. Time, much like a cat, does exactly what it wants and rarely stops to explain itself to the author. Stop number 4 belongs to a collective known as Tijuana's Crew. This is not a simple drop-and-go operation. This is a siege, and it requires the tactical patience of a gargoyle. The primary issue here is the local dinosaur population. Science will tell you that the mighty, terrifying predators of the Jurassic era eventually evolved into the modern chicken. Anyone who has ever tried to feed feral cats in the fading light of a Hawaiian evening does not need science to tell them this. They already know. A chicken, or clucker, in the local vernacular is essentially a velociraptor that traded its majesty for feathers, a beady-eyed stare, and a remarkably bad attitude. And, crucially, they possess an insatiable, entirely unearned appetite for premium feline pâté. If you put the food down too early, a feathery tide will descend, and the cats will get nothing but a lecture on the pecking order. Therefore, one must simply stop and wait. The cluckers, driven by a sort of solar-powered gluttony, stay up quite late into the twilight. This means the catering service must hold off until the sun truly surrenders to the Pacific. And so, I sit in the car. I watch the sunset paint the sky in ridiculous shades of orange and violet, partaking in a quiet ritual of my own. Now that the laws of the land have adopted a sort of collective, relaxed shrug regarding certain botanical pastimes, I find a good smoke serves as my own personal catnip. It keeps me as perfectly cool and unbothered as the 7 feline monarchs currently gathered around my tires. They wait patiently, these 7. They do not pace, and they certainly do not beg. They simply sit with the absolute, unshakable certainty of royalty awaiting a state banquet, knowing that by nightfall, they shall eat like czars. When the shadows finally lengthen enough to send the cluckers off to their roosts, I make my move. V.2, as established, operates on a very strict schedule and considers any delay a breach of contract, and a cat known simply as Nose are the first to the plate. In their pre-dinner excitement, they are a tangle of purrs and affectionate friction, rubbing against my legs as if I am the most deeply cherished creature in all of creation. This profound, cross-species bond lasts exactly until the food hits the dish. At that precise microsecond, they experience a sudden and total amnesia regarding my existence. I am no longer a beloved friend, I am merely the meat dispenser, a piece of mildly annoying background scenery that has thankfully dispensed its cargo. They bury their faces into the rich, juicy feast, the universe instantly narrowing down to nothing but the bowl. I quietly retreat to the safety of the car, adopting the role of sentry. I watch the perimeter, eyes peeled in the gloom for any lurking, opportunistic poultry. The cluckers can be a monumental pain, a feathery menace waiting just beyond the headlights. Only when the bowls are licked clean to a mirror finish, and the darkness has fully claimed the brush, do I put the car in gear. I'm back on the road again, leaving Tijuana's Crew to the very serious business of post-dinner grooming. Chapter 5, Canoes Fit for a Cat. So, we arrive at the 5th stop. The geography here is a bit of a contradiction. which is exactly the sort of place cats prefer to live. Here, a cemetery sits placidly in the middle of a park, flanking a long stretch of golden white sand that leads all the way to Black Rock. Rubbing shoulders with some of Maui's most opulent tourist resorts, it is also the home of the Lahaina West Side's most popular canoe club. I park strictly near the entrance. Further in lies the domain of the kiawe tree, a species of acacia whose primary evolutionary achievement is dropping long, hardened spikes designed with the express purpose of assassinating radial tires. It is here at Canoe Beach Park that we encounter a localized glitch in the fabric of feline reality, the doppelgangers. First, holding court near the cemetery, are Morris and Boris. Morris is large, orange and white, and does not scare easily. A graveyard cat, generally speaking, is built of sterner spiritual stuff. When your favorite sunbathing spot is adjacent to the dearly departed, very little in the world of the living gives you a fright. When he sees me, there is no hesitation. He is ready to eat, lumbering forward with his equally substantial companion, Boris, to demand their due. But physics and logic take a holiday on the other side of the wooded park, where one finds a second set of cats answering to Morris and Boris. They are slightly less hairy than their graveyard counterparts, perhaps due to a different microclimate, or simply an administrative error in the universe's feline distribution system. This second pair dines under the rusting, yellow bulk of an old construction vehicle, a metal monolith left behind as a relic from some bygone age of civic improvement. They do not dine alone, either. They are joined by the illustrious Cowcat and the legendary Quigs, who, true to his nature, performs the Mr. Quiggles maneuver, vibrating with the enthusiasm of a tiny, whiskered piglet. Then there is the matter of the boats. The canoe club management has made it abundantly clear, cats are not permitted in the canoes. Recognizing the diplomatic fragility of the situation, we arranged the feeding stations as far from the precious, polished watercraft as geometrically possible. The cats, naturally, do not care. To a cat, a sleek, curved vessel resting in the moonlight is not a sporting good or a cultural artifact, it is a throne. They slink past the invisible human boundaries and hop right in, their posture instantly shifting as they revert to their ancient Egyptian mindset. They sit tall in the bows, staring out at the Pacific as if waiting for passing tourists to offer them pyramids and worship. Furthermore, they stand formally accused by the club of using the expensive, pristine kayaks as personal, open-air potties. Shock, I tell you, absolute shock. Who could possibly imagine that a creature genetically programmed to seek out large, curved vessels of sand and dirt would ever look at a hollow boat on a beach, and draw the obvious conclusion? Chapter 6, His name is Bob. A saunter down into town from Canoe Beach brings me to the 6th stop. Here, in the shadow of the Safeway supermarket, lies the scarred remains of a burnt-out neighborhood. Most of the original feline residents have long since vanished, sensibly relocating to areas with a higher structural integrity and a lower likelihood of ash. This mass exodus has left the territory wide open for two undisputed masters of the theatrical arts, Bob and Garfield. When my car pulls up, the performance immediately commences. They emerge from the rubble with the trembling, hollow-eyed enthusiasm of creatures who have not seen a solitary kibble since the dawn of recorded time. They weave, they totter, they let out small, pathetic squeaks that suggest their very souls are running on empty. It is a magnificent display of method acting. It is also a complete load of rubbish. I am, you see, entirely onto them both. Bob, for instance, is currently sporting a rather fetching, high-quality collar complete with a shiny identity tag that jingles merrily as he weakly drags himself toward the food bowl. As the poem goes, his name is Bob, he's got a good job. Though, observing his relentless, unapologetic pursuit of a second dinner, one can only assume his boss is like an overbearing slob, driving poor Bob to seek solace in illicit evening pâté, just to cope with the stress of the 9 to 5. Then there is Garfield. Garfield is a robust orange and white cat, whose tragic backstory was spectacularly ruined one evening, when a perfectly pleasant gentleman wandered down from a newly restored house up the street. The man was highly amused to find his well-fed, deeply pampered house cat slumming it all the way down by the Safeway. The secret is out. I know their game, but, well, it changes absolutely nothing. They get their special extra evening meals anyway. Perhaps the kibble simply tastes better when it has the piquant flavor of mild deception. Or perhaps they just consider it a professional courtesy to relieve me of the heavy cans. Why let a good lie go to waste when it results in poultry gravy? Garfield, to his credit, is a gentleman grifter, unlike Tijuana's crew, who suffer sudden onset amnesia the moment the food hits the dish. Garfield cares not about where I am or what I'm doing, so long as I am the one bringing the goods. He is always genuinely delighted to see me. He even has the remarkable good grace to pause his feasting, trot back over, and politely see me off when I leave, proving that while he might be a complete fraud, he is at least a civilized one. Chapter 7, Invisible Cats and UFOs. It is a truth universally acknowledged by anyone who has spent enough time carrying cans of meat in the dark, that cats do not necessarily have to exist in order to be fed. This brings us to the mystery of stops 3 and 7. I rarely, if ever, see a physical, three-dimensional feline at either of these locations, one near the airport and the other by Walgreens. However, the director of the Save Maui Cats organization operates on a level of profound, almost religious optimism. He insists that food must be laid down just in case a cat might theoretically pass by. He claims to have seen them once. Thus, the ritual is observed. I leave out the pâté for the ghosts, the phantoms, the purely hypothetical felines of the highway, and move onward to stop number 8. Stop 8 is the UFO King Boatyard. Lahaina has many pastimes, one of the most popular being the practice of strapping tourists to a parachute, and having a motorboat haul them 100 feet into the air. From a distance, dangling against the Hawaiian sky, these brightly colored canopies look exactly like unidentified flying objects, provided, of course, that the aliens have decided to invade wearing fluorescent board shorts, and screaming in a mixture of terror and exhilaration. When the day's excitement concludes, the boats are hauled back to this very yard for their routine maintenance, and guarding this dry-docked fleet from the tyranny of rats and mice are two highly specialized members of the feline workforce, Quiglet and Rugs. Now, I must pause here to make a confession regarding my administrative approach to nomenclature. I forget names. My memory for titles resembles a sieve that has been enthusiastically employed to catch water. Therefore, I tend to name the root cats after exceedingly obvious physical features, or, more often, I simply recycle the names of the 7 cats we currently employ to manage our own household. Take Quiglet, for instance. My wife, Angel, a woman whose name is entirely accurate, though she possesses far more practical skills than your average celestial being, took up the noble hobby of making wigs for friends who had lost their hair to age or the cruel theft of cancer. Around this time, a tiny, painfully bony Abyssinian kitten walked off the street, and firmly informed us that we were now his parents. He was golden brown, possessing a desperately friendly nature, and we were terrified he might not survive the week, but he did. As he flourished, he took to sitting and deeply observing Angel as she crafted her hair components. Initially, we called him Earl Grey, but given his new supervisory role, his title morphed into the Kitten Wig Apprentice. In the natural, linguistic tumbling of a busy household, this was rapidly shortened to Quiglet. He Mr. Quigglestroke, he really wiggles. I digress, but only slightly. The Quiglet of the UFO yard is an exact, uncanny replica of our home Quiglet. It was only natural to bestow the same title upon him, and indeed, the 2 other similar-looking doppelgangers on the island. Seeing the boatyard Quiglet always gives me pause. It is a stark reminder of the fragile thread of fate. Had our own dear little feline not chosen our door, he would be out here in the dark. He would be staring at me with those hard, wary beware of stranger eyes, having entirely missed out on the hundreds of big and dignified hugs I have subjected him to right up until his current, nearly full adult size. Rugs, the other yard guard, requires far less explanation. Rugs is a super hairy, deeply dark-colored cat. The name stuck with the kind of inescapable gravity that only the most literal names possess because, When she lies down on the floor, she instantly ceases to be a cat and becomes a very plush, highly hazardous piece of interior decor. Chapter 8: The Vicar of the Volcanic Rock and the Backstage of Commerce. While the majority of my stops feature a multi-cat pile-up of frantic feline diplomacy, the station adjacent to the glass-blowing shop is a strictly solo parish. It is the domain of the one. His name is Sooty. Now, a cat already operates under the unshakable assumption that it possesses total moral and spiritual authority over all things. Sooty, however, has the uniform to prove it. He is clad in jet black fur, interrupted only by a single, perfectly defined white spot resting squarely at his throat. It looks exactly like a reverend's clerical dog collar. Consequently, one does not merely feed Sooty, one makes a quiet offering to the local vicar of the alleyway. He holds his evening sermons from a specific perch, an old volcanic boulder that serves as his stony pulpit. He does not demean himself by approaching the human too closely. That would be unseemly for a feline of the cloth. Instead, he waits with the pious patience of a saint. I place the daily meal upon the flat surface of the rock, consecrating it with kibbles and pâté. I fully suspect he offers a brief, silent prayer to the Great Mother of Fish before descending into the nosh with quiet, ecclesiastical enthusiasm. Once the Reverend Sooty has been seen to, the route winds onward toward the gateway center. Every grand temple of commerce has its dark, utilitarian underbelly, and this mall is no exception. A large track of service road wraps around the back, a concrete canyon designed for the rumbling behemoths that refill the sprawling stores. It is the backstage of capitalism, a place of pallets, loading docks, and industrial echoes. Naturally, it is teeming with cats. These are feral creatures, though they have all been respectfully relieved of their reproductive ambitions by the local authorities, leaving them to focus entirely on the more philosophical pursuits of napping and eating. They are a tough, worldly bunch, and while they bear names remarkably similar to felines we have already encountered, because, as established, my naming system remains firmly anchored to what I can remember right now, they each possess an entirely distinct character tale. In the first zone of this concrete canyon, right near the rear exhaust fence of the new coffee shop, resides the second Quiglet. He is a kitten, and his small size is a sharp, constant echo of our own dear pet back home. 5 nights a week, I make my rounds, and 5 nights a week, he is stationed on his exact, predetermined coordinate. He is getting bigger now, of course, fueled by the relentless application of premium wet food, though he still retains the frantic, vibrating energy required of his title. The sheer feral grit of the service road seems to evaporate the moment the tins are opened. He happily gorges himself, entirely unbothered by the fact that the giant, lumbering meat dispenser is actively fussing over him and topping off his water bowl. For those few minutes, amidst the roar of distant delivery trucks and the smell of roasting coffee beans, the universe is perfectly balanced, and the kitten is exactly where he is meant to be. Chapter 9: The Ghost of Butterball and the Mall Auditors. To truly understand the complex society operating behind the Gateway Center, one must first understand the legend of our own household. Her name was Butterball. She arrived as a kitten, sporting a large, grey, fluffy mane and the distinct, truncated rear end of an American bobtail. She accelerated through the obligate velociraptor phase of kittenhood with alarming speed, blossoming into a large, impossibly adorable floof. But it was not her fluff that made her legendary, it was her brain. Butterball possessed an almost prescient, Solomon-like intelligence. She looked upon the world with the weary, profound wisdom of a creature who had clearly lived through several previous lifetimes, and found human logical reasoning entirely lacking in all of them. She was taken from us suddenly, a mere 2 years into her short life, leaving a profound silence in her wake. But the universe, much like a cat noticing an open doorway, abhors a vacuum. As I missed her, I began to notice others. 2 others, in fact, dwelling in the grand concrete theater of the Gateway Center Service Road. I do not bestow the title of Butterball lightly. The original carried too much weight and authority for such casual rebranding. Yet, these 2 possess the exact same magnificent grey mane, the identical bobtail, and, most startlingly, that same inherent, penetrating intelligence. First, there is Butterball the Small. When I reach her designated section of the mall service road, she is always waiting in her exact starting position, radiating the energy of a deeply disappointed shift manager. As the car pulls up, the lecture begins. She meows with sharp, staccato vocalizations, loudly informing me that I am late, that the schedule has been compromised, and that the fabric of space-time is currently unraveling due to my negligence. I am required to reassure her that I am exactly on time, a fact she treats as an amusing, if entirely incorrect, human opinion. Once she has delivered her reprimand, she insists on being served dry food and only dry food. Having secured her crunchy appetizer, her managerial duties resume. She leaves her bowl and actively shadows me down the line, supervising the feeding of the others to ensure it meets her exacting standards. One of these others is Mr. Nibbles. Mr. Nibbles is a feral cat of jet black, panther-like proportions. Given his size, one might expect a creature of terrifying nighttime ferocity, but he is, in fact, the friendliest of the entire lot. He operates on a strict emotional toll system. No dinner can be dispensed until the mandatory petting requirements have been met. He waits with cheerful patience while the lesser felines receive their dry rations, knowing full well that his premium portion of wet food is coming next. As the law correctly dictates, of course Mr. Nibbles loves his kibbles, but only as a garnish for the main course. Then there is Garfield II, another white and orange kitten who navigates the world with a pronounced wobble, giving him the distinct appearance of a small, furry, and somewhat tipsy sailor. He treats the long section of the retaining wall like a grand buffet table. It is a sensible arrangement, elevating the dining experience safely above the tight, rumbling traffic of the service road. Garfield wobbles along the wall, thoroughly inspecting each and every pile of food I lay down, just to ensure equitable distribution. Finally, observing all of this, is Bonbon. Whether he is acting as James Bonbon, Monsieur Bonbon, or asserting his full aristocratic title of Sir Bonbon Fort Esquire I, he is a medium-sized American bobtail who treats my arrival as a highly auditable logistical event. He does not stop at a single station. Instead, he follows me for the entire length of the feeding section. While the other cats might eat and casually forget my existence, Bonbon pays intense, unblinking attention to the exact setting of each place. He doesn't openly criticize my technique if a dollop of pâté lands slightly off-center. He is far too aristocratic to complain. He is simply there, a teeny tiny fuzzy furry soldier on patrol, perfectly positioned to take immediate, silent advantage of any extra meat that might miraculously fall his way. Chapter 10, The Big Butterball and the Exotic Luxury. Toward the furthest, darkest reaches of the Gateway Center's logistical empire, the culinary rules undergo a strict and necessary alteration. Here, at the very edge of the concrete canyon, the menu is exclusively dry. This is not an act of cruelty, but one of vital civic preservation. If premium pâté were to be deployed in this specific sector, the results would be catastrophic. The local feline population, driven by the heady scent of poultry byproducts, would rapidly achieve critical mass. They would unionize. Worse, they would congregate in a vast, organized choir, engaging in what can only be described as preemptive, out-of-season Christmas carol meowing. To prevent this apocalyptic cacophony from shattering the sanity of the mall's night watchman, strict rationing of the crunchy stuff is enforced. But even a dry food-only sector has its royalty. Dwelling in this arid stretch is the granddaddy of them all, the Big Butterball. If the previous iterations of the Butterball lineage possessed a Solomon-like intelligence, this magnificent beast operates firmly on the Yoda scale of cosmic wisdom. He is a creature of immense fluff and profound gravity. He greets my arrival not with the frantic, vibrating demands of a quiglet, but with a slow blink from ancient, knowing eyes. He looks at you as if he understands exactly how the universe began, how it will end, and why it is absolutely essential that you hurry up with the kibble. He is patient, up to a point. Should I delay in any way, perhaps fumbling with the bag or taking a moment too long to admire the moonlight on the loading dock, he administers a prompt, heavy-duty brush against my shins. It is a physical reminder that while he may be wise, he is also entirely pragmatic about his dinner schedule. He does not govern this territory alone. Walking beside him, matching him step for dignified step, is an equally massive calico. She is known simply as Callie, a name that perfectly encapsulates her sweet, exotic luxury. She moves with the slow, deliberate grace of a creature who knows she is essentially a walking masterpiece of genetic paint splatter. As the dry food hits the bowls with a satisfying rattle, and the two giants settle into dine, I am always struck by the same enduring, baffling mystery. How is it possible that these two magnificent felines do not have a home? It defies all logical reasoning. Somewhere, there should be a roaring fireplace, a velvet cushion, and a human whose sole purpose in life is to brush Callie's exotic coat, and listen to the big butterball dispense silent, Yoda-esque wisdom. Yet, here they are, sovereigns of the loading dock, dining on dry rations under the Hawaiian stars, entirely content with their kingdom of concrete. Chapter 11, Cities Road and the Federal Fowls. It is an inescapable law of feline mathematics that a human will eventually run out of names long before the universe runs out of cats. Therefore, on the return leg of the route, we encounter another city. This city, however, is a creature of the highway, a small, brindle-patterned entity who operates on a highly compressed timeline. Whenever my car pulls up, her arrival is heralded by a sustained, enthusiastic vocalization that translates roughly to, "The temporal alignment is exactly now, human. Delay is treason." She is, by her own definition, the feral of the feral cats. In the early days, she observed the feeding process from a distance that required a good pair of binoculars to measure, viewing me with the deep suspicion of a creature who knows exactly how dangerous the world can be. But canned meat is a powerful diplomatic tool. Now, the moment the tires stop rolling, this small, agile feline materializes and shadows my every step. She stays exactly at my heel until we reach the designated safe area. Here, the strict rules of engagement dictate that her food cannot simply be placed upon the ground. It must be presented on the correct, richly purified surface, a paper bag. As my hand descends to place the meal upon this crinkly tablecloth, she is right there, practically brushing against my knuckles. We have reached a historic truce. We have agreed that we are almost friends, a fragile alliance entirely dependent on my continued ability to deliver poultry byproducts on schedule. With the treaty of the paper bag honored, the next stop is the old railway crossing. This is a place of rust and memories, guarded by an imposing duo. One has the distinct, heavy-duty aesthetic of the previously mentioned rugs, suggesting she too might occasionally double as a floor covering, but it is the other who commands the immediate attention. His name is Albion. He is a massive, creamy white cat with eyes that burn a pale, almost eerie red in the headlights, as the ancient, local poetry correctly dictates. Albion, he's your friend, he'll be with you right up until the end. Aside from the magnificent Mr. Nibbles, Albion is the friendliest soul on the route. He does not merely accept his evening portion, he validates the transaction with the firm, percussive application of a feline headbutt against my arm and legs. It is a profound display of inner circle affection, a physical stamp of approval from a giant white ghost, who has decided you are officially part of his pack. Leaving the warmth of the crossing, the route takes a turn for the bureaucratic. We arrive at the post office. The post office is home to multiple cats, but it is entirely dominated by a far more sinister force, the nighttime cluckers. In the natural order of things, chickens are supposed to find a roost when the sun goes down and enter a state of quiet, feathery dormancy, but the federal building is bathed in the harsh, unyielding glow of constant illumination. This endless artificial daylight has entirely broken the local poultry's understanding of time, creating a restless horde of insomniac chickens who live to eat through the night. Feeding the cats here requires the sort of covert tactical maneuvering usually reserved for espionage. The trick is a sleight of hand. First, one must dash a solid, decoy ration of cheap kibble directly toward the approaching fowl, while the dinosaur descendants descend into a chaotic, pecking frenzy over the crunchy diversion. I must adopt a posture of extreme nonchalance. I pretend to be doing nothing more sinister than performing a midnight geological survey of the concrete floor, all while slyly dealing the actual felines their rightful, high-grade portions from the shadows. None of the post office cats ever come close. There are no headbutts here, no enthusiastic meows of greeting. They wait in the gloom, watching the transaction with a kind of weary, detached professionalism. I suppose one cannot blame them. It is simply the penance of being a government cat. The crushing weight of the federal bureaucracy naturally dampens the spirit, leaving one with little energy for anything other than quietly eating in the dark. Chapter 12, The Yellow Sign and the Russian Diplomat. There is a specific kind of darkness that occurs on the edges of civilization, a heavy, thick sort of gloom that seems to absorb light rather than merely lack it. When I reach the darkest, most profoundly lonely stretch of the highway, I rely entirely on a single, solitary marker. I call it the yellow sign. It stands as a silent sentinel in the blackness, the only indication that human infrastructure hasn't completely surrendered to the wild. Pulling the car onto the rough grass, I must navigate a short but punishingly steep embankment. Waiting at the top of this incline is a highly specialized tactical unit, the highway Sooties. Unlike the individual Sooties encountered earlier, this is a collective. They are a congregation of entirely black felines who have collectively deduced that if one lives on the edge of a lightless void, adopting the camouflage of deep, impenetrable cover is simply sound evolutionary strategy. They are invisible until they open their eyes, at which point they resemble a cluster of disembodied, floating yellow orbs. Much like the dry sector at the mall, they receive only dry food. This is an austerity measure. If one were to introduce the high-grade wet pâté here, the resulting population boom of invisible night panthers would likely overrun the island. Leaving the void behind, the journey finally winds toward its conclusion. The last stop is the golf course. By the time I arrive at the manicured greens, night has officially conquered the sky. On the moonless evenings, which swallow the landscape whole, I am forced to don a headlamp. I suspect this makes me look less like a bringer of charity, and more like an incredibly slow, confused miner searching for coal in a sand trap, but it allows me to see the congregation. And what a congregation it is! The felines of the lynx do not wait in the rough, they are, as it were, already teed up and ready to play the first hole the moment the beam of my headlamp sweeps across the grass. While there are many felines haunting the fairways, two stand out as prominent fixtures of the nighttime circuit, Floof, whose name is entirely self-explanatory, and Pop-Off. In the strict, scientific taxonomy of street felines, Pop-Off is what is known as a cow-cat, predominantly white with large, irregular black patches, but Pop-Off possesses a soul, and more importantly a face, that is deeply, unmistakably Russian. I cannot explain the exact geometry of this phenomenon. Perhaps it is a certain world weariness in his eyes, or the stoic set of his jaw that suggests he has read too much Dostoevsky, and knows the winter will be long and bitter. Initially, Pop-Off and I had a severe diplomatic incident. He was highly aggressive, prone to sudden hissing and rapid, tactical lunges designed to distribute scratches. However, international relations improved dramatically when I realized my error. When dealing with a tense, spotted Russian operative, one must not rush. I consciously adjusted my behavior, moving with slow, deliberate, highly telegraphed motions. Pop-Off immediately recognized this. De-escalation. He dropped the aggression and adopted a policy of calm, heavily armed neutrality. Now, we have an understanding. Pop-Off has appointed himself the official auditor of the golf course. As I lay the dinners out along the predetermined feeding areas of the green, he walks alongside me, absolutely determined to personally sample every single plate before I move on to the next. This culinary inspection tour continues until we reach the summit of the hill. Here lies the final destination, a specially built, wooden feeding box, designed as a sanctuary against the elements and the anxiety of the open air. Waiting for me here is a little spotted creamy white kitten. He is a brave, tiny soul who follows me all the way from the bottom of the hill, his small legs working overtime in the dark. He does not stop to sample the lower buffets with Pop-Off. He waits until we reach the box. Only there, enveloped in the wooden safety of his little fortress? Does he finally settle in to eat his entire dinner, content that in this small, sheltered corner of a very large world, he is entirely safe? Chapter 13, The Final Stop. The journey of 1,000 miles, or at least a few dozen heavily rationed, strategically negotiated feeding stations inevitably concludes at the most complex way station of all, home. Here dwell the 7 sovereign rulers of my own household, the very creatures whose names and likenesses have been generously franchised out to the feral population of Lahaina. Their bowls are already full, but the evening is not complete until the primary meat dispenser has officially returned to the sanctuary. Waiting for me in the dark is the original article, Quiglet. He has been holding his vigil perhaps under the heavy, sprawling shadow of the monkeypod tree, or lurking with intent by the picket fencing. The moment I turn the corner, he abandons his post, darting under the gate with the aerodynamic precision of a furry missile. He makes a beeline for my side of the bed. He knows the routine. The human must first undergo the necessary ablutions to scrub off the dust of the highway. The human must then consume his own evening nourishment, a highly practical, profoundly comforting plate of beef stew on toast. The human must then sit down to translate the night's events, finishing the telling of another story into book form. By the time I finally approach the mattress, Quiglet's feline outline is already there, snoozing away with the profound, heavy-breathing innocence of a creature attempting to convince the world he has been asleep in that exact spot since Tuesday. Naturally, one cannot simply ask a cat to move. The only way to access the covers is through diplomacy, gentle, sustained petting until his internal engine catches, the purring gives his game away, and he graciously slides over a few inches. Elsewhere, the heavy artillery is positioned. James Bonbon, the large, tuxedoed cow cat, is also stationed by the gate. He isn't waiting for anything in particular, he is simply observing the universe with mild, bovine interest. Despite wearing the classic espionage uniform of a tuxedo, James possesses all the natural grace and stealth of a wooden wardrobe, falling down a flight of stairs. When he decides to seek a new resting place, the entire house is informed via a barrage of not-so-stealthy scrabbling, the heavy thumping of massive paws, or the spectacular crash of a feline simply failing to negotiate a baby gate. He is a master of stealth only when he is completely unconscious. Then there is Cluckers. She is a creature of terrifying unpredictability. You might find her sleeping under a flower bush, reigning from the highest tier of the living room cat tree, or simply lurking in the bathroom with vaguely sinister intent. One must tread carefully, because while she possesses her standard allotment of 2 eyes, she operates under the firm delusion that she is a terrifying, one-eyed Sinbad monster. She will hiss and dart from places of absolute non-concealment, entirely convinced of her own terrifying invisibility. Soxakins, sister to the legendary Butterball, is a different matter entirely. She is genuinely, spectacularly sneaky. She is always around, yet you are never quite sure where. She exists in a state of quantum feline probability, until, that is, you whisper the words fresh chicken. If a human so much as formulates the thought of cooking poultry, the presence of the sox is immediate. She materializes from the ether, gracing the unwitting chef with a desperate rain of meows, and a tactical assault of figure-8 leg rubs. Resistance, of course, is futile. Only after gorging herself on an ample portion of hot, fresh protein will she circle the kitchen in triumph and vanish back to her lurking places. Out in the shadows prowls Limper, the true outdoor operative. She is an enormous American silver gray, clad in the most ridiculously adorable, plush fur imaginable. Her name is derived from her most defining, and entirely theatrical, trait. She walks as though a tragic, invisible pin is permanently wedged in her paw. It is a heartbreaking display of bravery in the face of adversity. It is also a complete fraud. The moment she decides it is time to play, the limp miraculously vanishes, and she sprints across the lawn with the explosive speed of a cheetah. At night, she abandons the house entirely to be in the wild, lurking, unseen, and unbothered. Finally, there is Galaxy. True to her name, she is lazily sprawled across the chair by the front door, expanding to fill the available space. As I step inside and close the outer barrier against the Hawaiian night, I look around. The entire cat family has settled into the first of their many nocturnal slumbers. Out there in the dark, the feral cats of Lahaina are fed. The west side feels quiet, the heavy air thick with the scent of salt and blooming flowers. The world is peaceful, and we shall rest well until the morning comes, only to wake up and do the whole magnificent, chaotic thing all over again. We are, in the final accounting, entirely blessed. If you would like to donate to save Maui cats, https://savimauikats.org/